advantage. One of the advantages is provide a comparative study. So it is going to have a study of not a limited organism or limited plants or animal. We are going to study all the organism in a comparative way. We are going to compare them, their similarity, presence and absence. Dissimilarity, all those are taken into consideration. So it is one of the advantages. So it provides a comparative study where you can compare the organisms, right? Next advantage is no unrelated organisms are grouped together. Since we are taking all the natural relationship between the organism which are not related to each other, there is no chance of them to be put together in the same category or the same group. So it is advantage because in terms of no unrelated organisms are put together or grouped together. Therefore, this classification of this system of classification will not become artificial, but it will become natural, right? And lastly, it uses all the information available in the scientific world. So in the world of science, we have many information. So all those information are used, and therefore it provides a comparative study because all the information available are used. It provides a comparative study. So this is how the advantage of natural system is about. The next system of classification. I told you earlier that we will discuss three systems of classification. The first one is artificial system of classification. This is the second one, natural system of classification. Next is the phylogenetic system of classification. Phylogenetic system of classification deals with certain characters which are evolutionary in nature. Right? It is, when we say phylogenetic, it means classification which are based on evolutionary relationship among organisms. So the third system of classification, biological classification, is phylogenetic system of classification. And when we say phylogenetic system of classification, it means this system of classification is based on evolutionary relationship among organisms. This system is based on the father of evolution. Who is the father of evolution? Darwin. So this phylogenetic system of classification is based on Darwin's book. What is the name of the book? The name of the Darwin's book is quite long. On the origin of species. On the origin of species by means of natural selection, the preservation of favor races in the struggle for life. So this phylogenetic system of classification is based on the book of Darwin, and the name of the Darwin book is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, the Preservation of Favor Races in the Struggle for Life. Favor race means those races which are able to survive in the environment, which are being supported by the natural habitat or the surrounding in which it is present. Right? So this is the basis on which phylogenetic system is this. The phylogenetic system of classification it brings out, what does it brings out? It brings out a true relationship. Phylogenetic system of classification brings out a true relationship among the organism. Alright. So what does it reflect? It reflects the true relationship among organisms are reflected. Alright, and one of the example, a type of classification that is based on phylogenetic system of classification is that of Engler and Trent. Alright, Engler and Trent. It was in the year 1887 to 1899. So this is the first classification which is based on phylogenetic system. Okay, classification example is this, and you know, in this phylogenetic system of classification, in Engler and Trent system of classification, what do? They arrange plants according to their increasing complexity of their floral morphology. Right. So in case of this classification for plants, they arrange in terms of increasing floral morphology. So the flower which are more complex will be more evolved than the flower which are simple. So the plant are arranged in terms of their increasing floral morphology. Arranged in terms of increasing floral morphology, that is, the plant which have more complex flower will be grouped as higher evolved than the flower which are simple in arrangement. Understand? And another example is that of Hutchinson and Tucson. These names are like, it is going to be there with you throughout your life. Hutchinson and Tucson. Their classification is also based on phylogenetic, and it was in 1966. Therefore, compared to Engler and Trent, the Hutchinson and Tucson system of classification is more improved. Alright, because at that time we do not have much information available. When you compare 1966, we have many type of information available comparatively. Right? So therefore, this is also an example. And in case of Hutchinson and Tucson, what do is that they base their classification on possible evolutionary different traits. Alright, possible evolutionary traits which are evolutionary different. Alright, and in phylogenetic system of classification, fossils play a very important role, but the information of fossils is very limited. Alright, there is always a gap. We don't have much information on fossil, and compared to natural system of classification, phylogenetic system of classification is less practical. Alright, it is very difficult to put into practice. And then, sometimes what happens, even in a very higher organism, both primitive structure are also present. Right? Presence of both primitive and advanced character can be seen in the lifespan of an organism. Therefore, the phylogenetic system of classification has a demerit in that way. And since we have all this drawback, because of that we term phylogenetic system of classification not static but highly dynamic. Highly dynamic. So this system of classification, phylogenetic system of classification is not a static classification because this is less practical. Sometimes you find both the advanced and primitive character in an organism together, right? And you know, we have very less information on fossils, right? When you study evolution, definitely fossil is going to play a very important role, right? So we have very limited information on fossils, right? So because fossils are like, you know, they sometimes they are not formed, sometimes they get lost, and during transportation also they get lost. So we don't have enough fossil evidence. Therefore, we consider phylogenetic system of classification as a not a static but a very highly dynamic system of classification. So these are the type of biological classification that we will be studying, or we have finished studying. Now let's come to kingdom. The first kingdom is two kingdom classification. So when I say two kingdom classification, it means the animals or the plants or organisms are going to divide into two kingdoms, right? So when we study two kingdom classification, the person who is considered as the father of taxonomy is, what is his name? His name is Linnaeus. Is called the father of taxonomy, and he was the first one to come up with this classification. And in the past, where the scientific knowledge is not very vast like today, you know, people classify organisms. They simply divide organisms into groups. So one group is called kingdom Plantae, alright, for plants, and another is called kingdom Animalia for animals. You know, in here it is a very classification. It is a very rough classification. You know, the classification is based on animal plant which produce their own food are called plant, and animals which do not produce their own food are called animal. They are just dividing in that way. So organisms which are plant, they are also put in the animal, and animal are also plant, and animals plants are also put in animal. Animal are also put in plant because of limited information at that point of time. You know, in plant cells and animal cells, there are certain difference, right? You can see presence of vacuole in plant cells, absence of small vacuoles in animal cells. Why vacuoles are very important in plant cells? Because they store food material, and these food materials are produced by plant itself, which is not in that case of animal. In case of animal, they have to depend on others, right? So that is about the two kingdom classification. This two kingdom classification, the classification is entirely depend on the mode of nutrition. Okay, so when I say plant able to produce their own food, are put into kingdom Plantae, organism, and organism which cannot produce their own food are put under Animalia. But then there are certain organisms like, you know, fungi. This is group of organism belongs to plant, but they do not produce their own food, yes, right? But then based on the mode of nutrition, according to the two kingdom classification, they should belong to animal, which is quite wrong. Therefore, two kingdom classification was not considered, it was discarded. Next is, the next system of classification is three kingdom classification. In 1866, a person called Haeckel, what do? He come up with an idea to separate unicellular organism, algae and fungi from the kingdom Plantae. and he called them as Kingdom Protista. So he come up with a new group of new group of organism, and new name called Kingdom Protista. And then in here he tried to group algae, fungi, and unicellular organisms, right? Unicellular organisms. So again, what he do? He take up algae, fungi, and unicellular organism for animals, and then they try to put it in the separate kingdom. Now we have how many kingdoms? We have 3 kingdoms, right? Kingdom Plantae, Kingdom Protista, Kingdom Annelida. But all the unicellular organisms, are they fungi? No, they are not related to each other. So it is not taken into consideration. It is discarded. But we still have the name. We still take the name. Next is 4 kingdom classification. In 4 kingdom classification, you know, Copland. In this time it is Copland. And it was in the year 1956. Alright? He came up with a new group called the Kingdom Monera. Alright? And then what do? He tried to take out organism based on prokaryotes and eukaryotes. You know what is prokaryote? Microorganisms which does not have a true nucleus is prokaryote, and which have a well-defined nucleus and cell organelles are eukaryote. So Copland, he came up with the idea. And for Protista, you know, Haeckel was the lack of tissues. Those organisms which does not have tissues are placed under Protista. So again from Protista, we take out organism which does not have no true nucleus are taken out. Alright? And we know that it is prokaryotes. So prokaryotes are placed under a new kingdom, and that kingdom is Kingdom Plantae. Now we have 4 kingdoms: Kingdom Monera, Kingdom Protista, Kingdom Plantae, Kingdom Annelida. But still, this classification is not accepted. It is not 100% correct. And therefore, in the end, a person, in fact it is 2 persons, called R.H. Whitaker and they are American. Whitaker is an American scientist. So in 1969, so when information becomes more available, that is with the advancement of the earth, we developed the 5 kingdom classification, and this classification is based on phylogenetic relationship. So the 5 kingdom classification is based on phylogenetic relationship. In 5 kingdom classification, the characters which are taken into consideration are cell structures, right? We will say cell type. Okay, and 5 kingdom classification, these are the characters. Then these are the kingdoms. The first kingdom is Kingdom Monera, right? The second is kingdom Protista. The 5 kingdom classification proposed by Whittaker consists of five kingdom. The first kingdom is kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista. What is the next kingdom? The fungi, which is a plant but does not able to produce their own food, are entirely placed in another kingdom, right? Kingdom fungi. And we have kingdom Plantae, organism which are able to produce their own food, and in the end it has kingdom Animalia. So these are the 5 type of classification, 5 kingdom classification, and the character are, number 1 is cell type. So under Monera we have prokaryotes. So when I say prokaryotes, these are simple organization, mostly single cells, and they do not have a true nucleus, and they do not have membrane-bound cell organelles in them. So kingdom Monera have all the prokaryotes present in them. All of them are unicellular. Alright? And in kingdom Protista, you have eukaryotes. So eukaryotes are those type of organisms which have a true nucleus, which also have a membrane-bound cell organelles in their cytoplasm. But then in Protista, you have unicellular eukaryotes. Alright, so eukaryotes which are unicellular, which are made up of single cells, are put under kingdom Protista. Next is kingdom Fungi. Fungi are multicellular organisms. The cell type is eukaryotic. Alright, because they have well-defined cell wall, they have well-defined nucleus, and they undergo both sexual and asexual type of reproduction. Right? So all the eukaryotes, but then they are multicellular. Some fungi, like for example, yeast, are single cells. Right. So under kingdom Plantae, the cell type is also eukaryote. They all are multicellular, eukaryotic. And then in kingdom Animalia also eukaryotic cells are put together. So all the animals are multicellular, and they have what type of cells? A eukaryotic type of cells. Next character taken into consideration is cell wall. In terms of cell wall, it is a constituent of the cell wall that we taken into consideration. Either it is cellulosic or non-cellulosic. So in case of kingdom Monera, the cell wall does not have cellulose. Alright, but then it has polysaccharide. Okay, saccharide means sugar containing compounds. Poly means it's a polymer, and it also have amino acid. So they are non-cellulosic, but it has polysaccharide plus amino acids. Next is in Protista. The Protista have cell wall. In some group of the organism under Protista, they have cellulosic cell wall. Alright, so that is taken into consideration. Present in some, not but majority they make cellulosic cell wall. Fungi, you can see cell wall present, but in case of fungi, the cell wall is chitinous in nature and cellulose is absent. So it is without cellulose. The cell wall is present, but it is without cellulose. And in case of Plantae, the kingdom Plantae have cell wall which are cellulosic in nature. It has cellulose. Cell wall is entirely absent in animals. Animal cells does not have any cell wall. Right? So this cell type is the number 1 character taken into consideration by Whittaker. Number 2 is cell wall. Number 3rd one is nuclear membrane. The membrane that surrounds the nucleus is called nuclear membrane. So you can see that nuclear membrane are entirely absent in case of Monera. Monera because they have prokaryotic cells. We know the definition of prokaryotic cells. But in the remaining kingdoms, nuclear membrane is present. Higher organism, except for Monera, other organisms have nuclear or well-defined nucleus with a nuclear membrane. Next is body organization. How the body is organized. Single cell, cellular, single cell, cellular, and they are, in case of fungi, they are multicellular. Sometimes loose tissues can be found. And then in case of kingdom Plantae, we are multicellular. Animal also multicellular. Right, so this is about body organization. But when you go to animal, this multicellular can be tissues. Then you will find organ also. And then you find organ system. Many many cells form tissues that have same function and structure. Many tissues will form an organ. Many organs will form an organ system. And many organ systems will combine and form an organism. So this type of arrangement is found in Animalia. Alright, but the complexity or like organ system is not present in kingdom Plantae. So the last character that is taken into consideration in 5 kingdom classification is mode of nutrition. So in 2 kingdom classification, mode of nutrition was also taken into consideration. However, it was a very broad type of classification. So let us see the 5th character called the mode of nutrition. Under kingdom, you will find autotrophic, that is they are able to produce their own food, and it can be chemosynthetic using chemicals, alright, and it can be saprophytic, that is they are going to depend on other organisms, and it can be parasitic, means one of the host will be in parasitic mode of nutrition. The host will be having some sort of non-beneficial when the parasite is present. All right. So when under Monera you have autotrophic, chemosynthetic, as well as photosynthetic. You will also find heterotrophic, that is dependent on other for food, and heterotrophic can be saprophytic, that is dependent on dead and decayed organic matters, and also parasitic, that is when when an organism stays on another organism which is deteriorative to the host. And in case of Protista also have both photosynthetic type of mode of nutrition as well as heterotrophic type of mode of nutrition. Parasitic also can be seen in Protista. You know, the Malarian protozoa, they all belong to protozoa. They are parasitic in nature. Fungi is, the mode of nutrition in fungi is heterotrophic and it is saprophytic, that is they grow on dead and decayed organic matter. Kingdom Plantae have the mode of nutrition in them is autotrophic, that is they are the one which is going to produce their own food, and it can be also described as photosynthesis, that is they use the sunlight along with the chlorophyll present in them to produce their own food. Next, kingdom Animalia have heterotrophic mode of nutrition. In heterotrophic mode of nutrition, it can be parasitism. Alright, we will have parasite also, as well as holozoid. When I say holozoid mode of nutrition, it means when an organism or when an animal takes in complex food, and then that complex food is broken down into simpler one to be used in the system. Alright, so holozoid mode of nutrition is found only in kingdom Animalia. Autotrophic nutrition, this is typical of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is found in kingdom Mammals. So that's all about kingdom 5 human classification. Thank you, class.